Now, I think everybody knows Richard Edmonds, like they know me, or so-and-so. Now, Richard is a long-standing national activist and close friend of John Tyndall. Richard was the former organiser of the old National Front in the 1970s, National Front, News, NF and B&P. He ran the famous B&P bookshop down in Welling and was the national organiser for the B&P under John Tyndall for many, many years. Since 2011, he joined for historical and truth research across Europe. Richard has spoken at many previous JT Memorial meetings in Preston in particular, and he also spoke at this year's first John Tyndall Memorial meeting organised by Western Spring in Warwickshire. So, he's there. I was just going to say, come forward, Richard. He's there. Take the floor, Richard.
I'm here. Thank you very much, friends, fellow nationalists, and I thank the organisers of this meeting for holding this meeting in the name of John Tyndall, a meeting which, as your chairman here has said and the earlier speakers have said, has enabled us all to come together. Because these meetings, this and other such meetings up and down this country, we are now the nationalist movement. I know that we have different membership cards or maybe no membership cards in our back pocket. That is slightly irrelevant to the fact that we all have an adult, friendly, mature relationship with each other as per these meetings. It is very appropriate and very good that this meeting in particular is organised in the memory of John Tyndall. John Tyndall was an amazing man. He had an amazing ability, he had amazing energy, and he had great courage. And this man of enormous energy, ability and courage dedicated his whole adult life to our movement to save the British people. And I would like in particular today to focus on the history of our movement, because the fact is, if you think about it, it was the National Front of the 1970s as founded and established and organised by John Tyndall and his colleagues. It was the National Front of the 1970s that laid the foundations for all future, up to the present, and I believe into the future, of nationalist organisation in Great Britain. And I would like to focus on those pioneer years, and I'd like to focus on what John Tyndall and his colleagues, didn't do it on his own of course, managed to establish, because what they established in the 70s is of huge relevance to us here and now. And that's the point I want to make in this meeting that you've organised here. In the 1970s, this country was faced with the race problem for the first time ever in our thousands of years of living on these British islands of ours. For the first time ever in living lifetime, in my lifetime, when I was a child, I've not always been this tall, by the way. I used to come up to your knees at one time. When I was a little lad looking round, like other older men and women in this country. This is a white country. In our lifetime, we've had the millions from Pakistan, India, the West Indies, Africa, and the rest of the world. And I can tell you, in the 1970s, when I and others in this room looking around were active in the National Front, we represented very much the British people. We represented a sense of outrage of being flooded with all these third worlders, because we didn't want millions of third worlders in this country, and we didn't want this country changed forever. We didn't want this forced onto us. We didn't want the alien cultures forced upon us. We didn't want to see our cities become permanent crime and riot zones. We didn't want elderly, vulnerable people mugged by muggers. There was a time when we didn't have muggers in this country, and there was a time when we didn't have the word mugger in our vocabulary because there were no muggers in Great Britain. And we don't want, yes, that's right.
May those days come again, yeah.
And we don't want bloody murderous crimes committed in this country in the name of some alien god. We don't want that either. Now, in the 1970s, race, crime and immigration, they were the burning issues of the day, and John Tyndall had the character and the verve to seize the political moment of those 70s, and he made the National Front a household name. And I repeat, there are men and women in this room, with me and others, who were part and parcel of all that. Now, I emphasise the decade for a reason. It's historically true that nationalism took off in the 70s under John Tyndall and others, but there was a key man who, if you like, opened the door. And I was living witness to this. I'm referring to that great British patriot, Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell had made his speech in 1968, warning this country that this country was piling up its funeral pyre for a future destruction by letting millions of third worlders into this country. Now, I was a young chap in 68, whatever age I was, 20-something rather, and I know the British people were electrified by what Powell said. He spoke for millions, and I can tell you there was a working class paper in those days which was rather more serious than it is now, just as duplicitous, but seemingly more serious, a paper read by many working class people called the Daily Mirror, right? Rather more serious than it is now. And the Daily Mirror, lying through their teeth, said to the British people, all these coloureds, they're only going to stay a short time. They're only here as apprentices and students, and they're going back home, and they're not going to stay here, and they're not going to colonise us, and they're not going to take our cities over, and they're going to be very, very well behaved and appreciative whilst they're in our country. That was a Daily Mirror in 1965, when I was the sort of class, decent patriotic working class, decent patriotic parents. We used to have, that's a fact, the Daily Mirror in our house. I wouldn't have touched it now, a rag. But that paper conned the patriotic working class in this country. They swallowed it. Absolute lies. Absolute lies. They've been lying for 50 years. Anyway, the Daily Mirror, shrewd, anti-patriotic, I'll use a German word, Schweinhunde. Shall I say that? You know what the word Schweinhunde means, don't you, eh? They recognised the potency of the MP for Wolverhampton South West. And when Powell spoke, the Daily Mirror said, Powell has broken the conspiracy of silence, because for the first time ever, an honourable man arose at Westminster and spoke for us, the British people. And the Daily Mirror noticed all that. In the 1970s, John Tyndall, tremendous bravery, tremendous energy, tremendous ability, and others, and a whole team. John Tyndall, I say his name, I use that name to cover all the activists and all those who supported us and all those who voted for us. We campaigned up and down this country, marches, demonstrations, election campaigns, in every major city and town. In fact, you joined the National Front and you said, where are we going to this week? We're going to Birmingham, we're going to Leeds, we're going to Nottingham, all over. Wonderful. And a camaraderie was built up. You was no longer on your own, talking to your family, your mum and dad or your girlfriend or whatever. You was with a camaraderie. And we set something going, that National Front 1970s, which is still going to this day. Thank you very much. And every activity promoted one policy in particular with one slogan that made us a household name. And that policy and that slogan was stop immigration and start repatriation. I can tell you, when I was thinking of joining the National Front, which I think was 1973, however many decades ago that was, I live in London, I used to commute to work on these little, suburban trains rattling through all the suburbs. And those trains were covered with stickers saying, stop immigration, start repatriation, National Front. And I thought, I've got to join these boys. So, Happy days. Anyway, yes, the National Front was actually founded 50 years ago this year. And tomorrow, as a matter of fact, by coincidence, under this heavy schedule that we operate in this game, tomorrow there's going to be a major meeting in the South, in the West Midlands, organised by the National Front, celebrating 50 years of the National Front. Now, the National Front has had some ups and downs, but some of us have some ups and downs. It's called living in this world, isn't it, right? But the National Front is still here, and I can tell you, as a bit of an advert for the National Front and this 50th anniversary tomorrow, down there south in the West Midlands, that the guest speaker speaking at the National Front rally is going to be a founder member of the National Front who joined it when he was a teenager, a leading activist in the 1970s, a spokesman for the National Front in the 1970s, a leading member of the Directorate, a former member of the European Parliament. In fact, he was so successful on the electioneering game, talking about Andrew Bronze, right, will be the guest speaker tomorrow at the NF meeting. Anybody who wishes to attend that, if you wish, see me in the interval, I'll give you the details. I was there along with others, and I remember the outrage that people didn't want this problem burdened on us. We had a shrewd idea where it was moving to. People did not want it. And the background to the rise of the National Front was always Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell's great speeches was the background to the rise of the National Front. I'm going to come to that in a minute. And when Powell, this great man who spoke for millions, when Powell, the Conservative member for Wolverhampton South West, when Powell was expelled from the Tory party by those heartless swine of the Tories, heartless, they knew that Powell spoke for millions and they threw him into the wilderness. And when Powell was thrown into the wilderness, it was the National Front, the energy and the courage and the vim of the National Front which stepped into the political vacuum and carried the banner. And I will say, it was pretty clear to me then, and it's very clear to me now, that there was a symbiotic relationship between Enoch Powell and the rise and the success of the National Front. That each, because Powell was speaking all the time to the 1970s, having been thrown out the Tory party, he carried on speaking and writing articles, and the National Front was campaigning all through the 70s. It's clear that one reinforced the other in their combination of opposition to mass coloured immigration and their opposition to the traitorous members of Parliament down there in Westminster. And all the time, I'll remind you, the Front was campaigning on the slogan, "Stop immigration, start repatriation." That's what launched the National Front, and that's what kept it going for 10 years. There were other problems, I won't go into all that. And then, on the 20th anniversary of Powell's 1968 Rivers of Blood speech, on the 20th anniversary, we're now talking 1988, Powell wrote an article in one of the major Sunday papers, an article returning to the theme of race, crime, and immigration. I'm going to quote to you what Powell wrote in that article. Powell said, "This country, Britain, would be fully entitled and fully within its rights and fully justified in repatriating, returning, resettling all the third worlders back to their countries of origin." And Powell continued in this article, in this major Sunday newspaper, Powell continued, "We have all seen the social stresses and the misery brought about by this mass immigration. We have all seen and witnessed the crime, the alien creeds, and the demographic swampings of our cities, and we, the British people, do not have to accept or tolerate this alien takeover of our country. And then Powell concluded with these words: we would be fully justified, this country would be fully justified in resettling the third worlders back in their lands of origin. And that was Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell, the only honourable and brave man to walk the corridors of the Palace of Westminster, the House of Commons, in a very, very, very long year. Thank you. And what Powell said then, in '88, applies with exactly the same force today. We all know, everybody in this country can see, that the future of Britain is on the balance. And meantime, as our first chairman spoke to and duly addressed, we know that nationalism is at a crossroads. Our former party, the British National Party, has been destroyed, I will say, by a negligent ruling clique. I'm not going to go any further. The party is destroyed. We all regretted it. We all put a great deal of blood, sweat and tears into it. But we move on. We move on. Of course we do. This country has been around for a long time, and the British have been living in the British Isles for several thousands of years, ever since the end of the last ice age, actually. So we allow for the little inconveniences and minor troubles. So the former BNP is destroyed, and we are seeing now, I'm pretty sure, I've conferred with Peter and others, we are seeing the collapse of get it right, the civic nationalist multiracial, because you look at the candidates that UKIP has put up.
Yeah.
The civic nationalist, multiracial UKIP is collapsing before our eyes. I'll put it to you, friends, that now, if we are prepared and if we are ready, that now is the time and the opportunity to relaunch racial nationalism. Thank you for that support. At this late hour, when the whole white race worldwide is under enormous pressure in all white countries, but only white countries, of genocidal levels of mass immigration, and all white countries, in particular our one, being ruined and betrayed by the ruling clique down there at Westminster. I put it to you, friends, if we want to be socially and politically relevant, then we relaunch racial nationalism under the same slogan and with the same policy that made the National Front famous and world household name in the 1970s, and which was supported by the only honourable member of the House of Commons, Enoch Powell, that we relaunch racial nationalism with the slogan and the policy of stop immigration, start repatriation, and finally, there is every reason to be optimistic here, because we witnessed last year the winning 17.5 million Brexit votes. Now, that was a vote against mass immigration. That was a vote to keep Britain white. And that was the winning vote, and the establishment is still reeling. Look at the Tories, they're reeling. And meanwhile, in that fine country, founded by British people, the United States of America, and whether they were wise to say goodbye to George III, we might want to discuss on another occasion, right? However, in that fine country, the United States of America, the winning 63 million votes for Trump, whatever Trump can or cannot produce, because he's under a lot of pressure, we understand it, but 63 million Americans want to keep America, America, and they don't want to be flooded by the millions of the third world. So, thank you very much.